Today, I'm talking about something I have never heard talked about before, ever. I have never heard anybody talk about this. And those are the things that Grandma stopped doing after the Depression, when they started having money again. So I just wanted to tack this in my video. I got this video all shot and edited, and I realized I misspoke in this video. These aren't things that Grandma did after the Depression. It was actually after World War II that Grandma did these things. So I didn't want people to think that I didn't know my American history. I know it. I just misspoke and said that Grandma didn't do these things after the Depression, but it was actually World War II. So after World War II, Grandma stopped doing all these things. Number one, they stopped cooking from scratch. Now, cooking from scratch as a definition could be a wide range of things. But I will tell you that out of the 7 grandmas and great-grandmas and great-great-grandmas that I had when I was born, I don't remember one ever making a cake from scratch. Ever. None of my grandmas ever made a cake from scratch. As a matter of fact, my mom's mom used to make wedding cakes for people, and she used a box mix even to make wedding cakes. Everybody raved about how delicious they were. Grandma stopped cooking from scratch. And I'll tell you, I think they just got tired of cooking. They wanted it quick. They wanted it simple. They lived on farms. They didn't have time to waste spending it on elaborate meals or things like that. All of their pudding mixes, my grandma's bought all of their pudding mixes, canned fruits, canned vegetables, cake mixes, graham crackers, and here's a funny one, egg noodles, frozen foods, those kinds of things. One time, my family raved and raved about my great-grandma's egg noodles. And my mom asked her, she said, "Oh, what's your secret to your egg noodles?" And she said, "I buy them at the grocery store in the frozen section." And she did. She bought her egg noodles at the frozen section. So Grandma dumped cooking from scratch as soon as she had the money after the Depression. The next thing Grandma did not do was grow her own food. I had, let's see, 5 or 6 grandmas that were still living into my 30s and 40s. My one grandma is still alive, and I'm almost 50. None of them ever had a garden, ever. They never had a garden. And the one grandma that I get my gardening skills from, or gardening passion from, I guess I should say, she did have a couple of tomato plants, and my mom's mom would have a tomato plant here or there, but they really did not have any gardens at all. After they got through the Depression, after they got off the farm, they were like, this is for the birds. Why am I wasting all this energy having a garden? So I'm not anti-garden. I'm a huge gardener, but they stopped gardening after the Depression because why waste your time and energy growing food when you didn't need to? And at that point, you know, food was cheap enough that you could get it at the store just as cheap as growing it in the garden. So they stopped growing gardens after the Depression. They also stopped canning. My great-grandma canned the best peach jelly jam, I guess it was jam, the best peach jam you've ever had. She had a peach tree in the backyard. Absolutely delicious peach jam. But none of my grandmas ever canned anything. And when I was talking to my great-grandma and my grandma, they were like, why would I waste all this time and energy canning food when I can go to the grocery store and get it? Seriously, Grandma stopped canning as soon as she could. All 4 of my grandmas that I remember from my childhood, none of them canned. And all of them were like, I ain't wasting time and energy on canning. So I know that's going to tick a lot of people off, but they didn't. Grandma stopped canning as soon as the Depression was over. Along with the gardens, they didn't do things like have a compost pile. A compost pile is a really big thing that a lot of people get into to recycle type things. But if they didn't have a garden, they didn't have a compost pile. So they got rid of things like the compost pile and they didn't even mess with them anymore. And they just started throwing away their food. Now, I have a compost pile usually because I have a garden. But quite frankly, if I'm not gardening, I wouldn't have a compost pile either. The next thing they didn't do after the Depression was they didn't save money at the grocery store. And you might say, Tara, what? Really? All of my grandmas, as soon as they started having enough money, they started buying things that they liked. And my one grandma, I remember I was horrified one time when she went to the grocery store, and I think she got like 2 or 3 weeks worth of food, and it was $600. And this was in the early 90s. And it was 2 of them. Now, my grandma did feed the whole family all the time. So, you know, she was feeding more than just the 2 of them. But I was horrified when she was buying fancy things like, you know, a roast that wasn't on sale and cottage cheese that wasn't on sale. Grandma, all of my grandmas, they pretty much went to the store, and if they wanted Nesquik, they bought Nesquik. If they wanted a certain jam or jelly or fancy blueberry syrup, they would just buy it. And they didn't really save at the grocery store. Now, my mom's mom did save somewhat because she went to the commissary. But even the commissary didn't just tighten up and just really get the best deal on everything she could. She would go and just buy what she wanted, and she got it at the commissary, so it was a little bit cheaper. But you know, if she would have waited at the grocery store, she could have gotten it for a lot less on sale or something like that. So after the Depression was over, Grandma stopped saving at the grocery store, and she bought what she wanted. If they wanted grapes, and grapes were $3 or $4 a pound, they would buy grapes. So I thought that was kind of interesting that once the Depression was over, they really didn't try to save a lot of money at the grocery store. They stopped using wood for heat. My mom's mom did have a wood stove, and my dad's mom did have a wood stove, but they didn't really like using it. And my mom's mom, as soon as she could, she stopped using the wood stove. And I even remember I got a wood stove one time, and Grandma was like, "Why are you getting a wood stove? Those things are such a pain and they're such a mess. Why are you even messing with a wood stove?" So I thought it was funny. And my dad's mom, she had a wood stove, but frankly, I don't think it was her that wanted the wood stove. I think it was my grandfather who wanted the wood stove. And maybe not. I don't know for sure on that one. But I do know that my great-grandma was like, "I ain't messing with wood anymore." They had a gas stove or a gas fireplace. She was like, "I'm not wasting my time and energy on that." And it was a mess. Wood stoves are messy. Fireplaces are messy. They stopped wearing cotton. You'll say, "What? They stopped wearing cotton?" Yeah, they stopped wearing cotton. Like, the majority of my grandmas started wearing polyester and rayon. Why? Because they didn't like ironing. And back then, they didn't have the cottons that they do now, or the processing of the cottons that they do now to make them soft. And they had to iron everything. They had to iron sheets, pajamas, pillowcases, shirts, pants. They had to iron everything, and they absolutely hated ironing. And I remember my grandmas, as soon as polyester was available, they started wearing it, and they gave up the cotton, and they were happy to do it. They stopped line drying clothes. Now, my mom's mom did continue to line dry clothes throughout her entire life. Even just as recently as a couple of weeks ago, she's 93. She was hanging clothes on a rack inside. My grandma never used her dryer. But my other grandmas, as soon as dryers came available and they were cheap enough for them to get, they started drying clothes, and they did not save money by hanging clothes on the clothesline. They were once again like, "I'm not spending that much time and energy when I can just throw it in the dryer, pull it out, no wrinkles, nothing. and I've got clean, fresh looking, non-wrinkled clothes. They totally gave up the cotton. They didn't use cleaning products like vinegar to clean. This is a huge myth that a lot of people think, and even in the Depression, Grandma didn't really use vinegar to clean. I mean, if they had hard water, maybe, but a lot of times they didn't even have running water in the Depression. So they wouldn't need to clean with vinegar. But vinegar is not a disinfectant. So that myth that's going around on the internet is not true. Vinegar is not a disinfectant, and you should not use it to disinfect your house. Grandma, as soon as good disinfectants were available, they had their Pine Sol, they had their Lysol, they had their bleach, and it was there, and that is what they used to clean and disinfect their house. Otherwise, it was basically boiling hot soapy water. They would get really, really super hot water. If they needed to sterilize something, they would put it in boiling water. But it was basically just soap and water for cleaning during the Depression. And afterwards, when Grandma was able to get disinfectants, let me tell you, they used them because they lived through really bad sicknesses. And they saw, you know, what a truly bad sickness can be like. And they used their disinfectants, and they loved their disinfectants. And my other grandmother was a CNA, so she worked in a hospital a lot. And so she was always making sure everything was disinfected. Last but not least, they didn't use newspapers for cleaning. Now, a lot of people say, oh, use newspapers to clean your windows. Guys, don't use newspapers to clean your windows. The ink that gets all over your hands, that gets all over your windows. And it may not leave streaks, but it does leave a black film all over your windows. They stopped using newspapers for those kinds of things. Now, they still save the newspapers, like if they were peeling potatoes, they would lay them down and put the potato peels on there and then throw them away or something like that. But they did not use newspapers for cleaning. So I hope that helps you guys to not feel bad when you do these ridiculous tips that people talk about saving money. Grandma didn't do it. They didn't. And so don't feel bad if you don't like canning. Now, once again, if you like canning, go ahead and can. I'm not anti-canning. You can go ahead and can. But don't feel bad if you don't wear all cotton clothes. Don't feel bad if you have the money and all your debt is paid off. Go buy what you want at the grocery store. It's okay. After you get all your debt paid off. And that's the thing. Grandma was debt-free, her house was paid off, all of her credit cards, cars, everything was paid off. So then afterwards, they were able to go spend more money, and they did, and they made their lives easier, and they got the things that they wanted. Please check out our Saving of the Green sale at livingonadime.com, up to 70% off right now.